I'm sitting here, reflecting on one of the most painful chapters of my life. It's hard to believe that just a few months ago I thought I had everything: a loving wife, a solid home, and a bright future ahead. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. My name is Mark, and this is the story of how I found out my wife, Jenna, was cheating on me with my deployment buddy, Tyler, while I was recovering from combat injuries. Jenna and I had been married for 3 years. We met in college, and there was something about her that drew me in from day one. She was beautiful, smart, and had a laugh that could light up a room. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but we worked through them. That was until I got deployed and came back injured. When I arrived home, I was optimistic that things would be normal again, but I quickly realized I was in for a battle that had nothing to do with my physical injuries. Tyler was a good friend, someone I had shared countless memories with in the service. When I got hurt, I asked him to stay with us for a few weeks to help out around the house while I was recovering. At first, it felt like a great plan. He could watch the place while I focused on healing. But soon after he arrived, I started to notice things. Jenna was more distant. The playful banter we used to share was replaced with awkward silences. There were nights when she'd stay up late, and I could hear her whispering in the other room. She always told me it was late calls with her work. She was a marketing manager. I wanted to believe her, but my gut told me something was off. One evening, I was feeling particularly restless after a long day of rehab exercises. I decided to make my way down to the kitchen for a glass of water. As I tiptoed down the hallway, I noticed the light coming from the living room. I paused, thinking it was just Jenna watching TV. But as I got closer, I heard laughter, a sound that didn't come from her. It was unmistakably Tyler's voice, mixed with hers, and it sent a chill down my spine. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I backed away, but the next few days were agonizing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was definitely wrong. When I confronted Jenna about her late-night calls, she got defensive, insisting I was being paranoid. "Mark, you're just being insecure because of everything you've been through," she said, rolling her eyes as if I were being ridiculous. Her dismissive attitude only added fuel to my growing suspicion. It all came to a head one afternoon while I was lying on the couch, flipping through old photos on my phone. I stumbled across one of Tyler's old messages. It was a group chat from a few weeks ago, and the conversation had turned explicit. They were joking about things that should never be discussed with spouses. I felt like I was punched in the gut. My heart raced and my head spun. I knew. I just knew. When I confronted Jenna later that evening, the truth spilled out like a tidal wave. "I've been with Tyler," she confessed, her voice steady but lacking any remorse. "It's just sex, Mark. It didn't mean anything." I felt the world around me collapse. Her words were like knives twisting deeper with each syllable. All the trust I had in her shattered right before my eyes. I couldn't even process the betrayal. I just stood there feeling lost, like a ghost in my own home. I wanted to scream, to cry, but instead I felt numb. How could she do this to me? How could she betray my trust when I was vulnerable and healing? I needed to gather my thoughts. This was my life, my marriage crumbling right in front of me. I could either wallow in despair or take control of the situation. Deep down, I knew I had choices to make, and I needed time to figure out what those choices were. As I sat in silence, trying to piece my shattered heart back together, I realized the real struggle was just beginning. After that confrontation with Jenna, my world spun into chaos. I felt broken, angry, and utterly betrayed. The woman I had loved and trusted for years had just shattered everything I believed about our relationship. There were moments when I thought I would suffocate under the weight of my emotions, grief, fury, and disbelief crashing over me like relentless waves. In the days that followed, I was on autopilot. I moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding Jenna as much as possible. She tried to reach out to talk about what had happened, but all I could think about was how easily she had thrown away the trust we had built together. Her excuses felt cheap and hollow, and I wasn't ready to hear any more of her lies. Every time she attempted to explain, it only deepened my anger. "It didn't mean anything," she would say, a phrase that echoed in my mind like a taunt. If it didn't mean anything, then why was she with him? I needed to gather evidence. I wanted to know the full extent of her betrayal. So, while Jenna was at work, I began to search through our shared computer and her phone. I felt like a detective, piecing together clues that would explain the inexplicable. I found texts that made my stomach churn, a continuous thread of flirtation with Tyler, filled with inside jokes and moments they had shared while I was still healing. It was like finding a diary full of secrets. Even more painful were the photos, candid shots of them together. Too close for comfort, smiles plastered on their faces as if nothing else in the world mattered. Each new discovery felt like salt on an open wound, deepening the hurt. I couldn't believe that while I was fighting to get back to a normal life, she was sharing laughter and intimacy with someone else. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't just a fleeting mistake. It was a full-blown affair that had been happening for weeks, maybe even longer. One night after a particularly brutal day, I confronted Jenna again. I told her I knew everything. The texts, the photos, they were etched in my mind. She went pale, then red, her expression shifting from shock to defiance. "Mark, you don't understand. I was lonely," she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "You were gone and I felt abandoned. Tyler was there for me. Was he there for you or was he just using you?" I shot back, my voice shaking with rage. I could feel the walls closing in. Every argument we had seemed to build a fortress around me, isolating me from the love I once felt for her. "This isn't about being lonely, Jenna, this is about betrayal. This is about you choosing to sleep with my friend while I was recovering from injuries." She didn't have an answer for that, and the silence hung heavy between us. It was then that I realized I no longer recognized the woman in front of me. The wife I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who had hurt me in a way I hadn't thought possible. I needed a plan, a way to reclaim my life from the wreckage she had caused. In the days that followed, I began to contemplate my options. I could see the grief and confusion in Jenna's eyes, but part of me didn't care. The anger was more powerful. I began to devise a plan, not just for revenge, but for my own recovery. I knew I needed support, and I reached out to my best friend, Jake, who had been there for me through thick and thin. He was furious when I told him what happened, and he offered a safe place to stay. "You don't need to be around her, Mark. You need to focus on you," he said, his voice filled with concern. As I packed up some essentials from my home, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Leaving the life I had built with Jenna was hard, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't live under the same roof as someone who had betrayed me so deeply. I needed clarity, a fresh start away from the pain that lingered in every corner of our house. Once I moved in with Jake, everything started to change. I had time to think, to process the betrayal. I wasn't just a soldier recovering from physical wounds. I was also a man trying to reclaim his emotional integrity. I spent evenings talking with Jake about my feelings, sharing the weight of my story with someone I trusted. Each conversation felt liberating, like shedding layers of sorrow I had been carrying around for too long. I also started going to therapy. I needed to understand why Jenna had acted the way she did, and how I could heal from the trauma of her infidelity. It was eye-opening. I learned that healing wasn't just about moving past the betrayal. It was about rebuilding the trust within myself. I needed to reclaim my self-worth, which had been battered by her actions. As I settled into this new life, I began to reflect on what I wanted moving forward. I knew I had decisions to make, but for the first time in a long while I felt a flicker of hope. I was starting to see that I had the power to rebuild my life, to choose a path that was right for me. The pain was still fresh, but I was determined to come out on the other side stronger than I ever had been before. With each passing day, I felt a little more like myself again. The anger that had once consumed me was now giving way to a sense of purpose. I knew I needed to confront Jenna again, but this time, it wouldn't be about anger or accusations. It would be about closure, my closure. I needed to find a way to let go of the past and step into a future that was mine to claim. After settling in with Jake, I spent a lot of time reflecting on what had happened. I was still grappling with the emotional wreckage Jenna had left in her wake, but I knew I needed closure before I could fully heal. The thought of confronting her again was daunting, but I realized it was something I had to do. I needed to hear her side one last time to understand her motivations. More importantly, I needed to reclaim my narrative. I reached out to Jenna to set up a time to meet. She responded quickly, eager to talk. I could tell she was feeling the fallout of her choices. The anger in her voice was mixed with a hint of desperation. It was clear she didn't want to lose me completely, but I had already made my decision. I was done being a doormat. I wouldn't allow myself to be manipulated any longer. When the day arrived, I was surprisingly calm. I had spent hours practicing what I wanted to say and how I wanted to approach the conversation. I chose a small cafe that was halfway between our places, a neutral ground where we could sit down and talk without the pressure of being in our home. As I walked in, the scent of coffee wafted through the air, and the atmosphere felt busy yet comforting. Jenna was already seated at a corner table, fidgeting with her phone. She looked up when I approached, her eyes wide, and I noticed a mix of hope and shame reflected back at me. I sat down, and for a moment neither of us spoke. There was a weight in the air, an unspoken tension that had built between us since the betrayal. "Thanks for meeting with me," she finally said, her voice shaky. "Let's just get to it," I replied, wanting to cut through the small talk. "I need you to be honest with me this time. Why did you do it?" Jenna took a deep breath, her expression shifting from hope to regret. "I don't know, Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "I felt so alone when you were gone. I thought I could handle it, but I didn't want to burden you with my feelings. Tyler was there, and I let myself get carried away." "Carried away?" I echoed, incredulous. "You didn't just get carried away, Jenna. You made a choice, multiple choices. You betrayed me." "I know, and I'm so sorry," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "It was a mistake. I regret it every day. I thought we could work through it when you came back, but I was scared of how you would react." "A mistake? That's how you view it," I shot back, the anger flaring again. "You didn't just slip and fall. You made a conscious decision to sleep with my friend, my buddy. You turned a blind eye to the vows we took." She looked down, the shame washing over her face. "I know I messed up. I never meant to hurt you. I just felt so lost." As we talked, I realized that while her feelings of loneliness were real, they didn't justify her actions. I had been fighting my own battles, trying to heal from my injuries, and she had chosen to betray me instead of reaching out for support. It was a bitter pill to swallow. "Jenna, it's going to take a long time for me to trust you again, if I can ever trust you again," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not sure I can forgive you. I need to focus on my healing, and right now, that means distancing myself from you." Her eyes widened, and I could see the panic set in. "Please, Mark, don't say that. I want to fix this. I love you. I know I messed up, but I'll do anything to make it right." "It's not just about love, Jenna. It's about respect and trust, things you shattered," I replied, my voice firm. "I can't keep putting myself in a situation where I'm waiting for you to prove to me that you're worth my trust again." There was silence as the gravity of my words sank in. Jenna looked devastated, but I couldn't feel pity for her. I had spent too long feeling pity for myself. I was done being the victim in this narrative. "I think it's best if we go our separate ways for now," I finally said, the words heavy on my tongue. "I need to focus on myself. I need to heal without worrying about your feelings or the mess we've created." Her face crumpled, and I could see the tears spill over as she nodded, defeated. "I understand," she whispered. "I just hope someday you can forgive me." I didn't respond right away. I didn't know if I could, or if I would ever want to. Instead, I stood up, leaving her sitting there, lost in her remorse. As I walked away from that cafe, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had finally taken a stand for myself. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since the betrayal, I felt a flicker of hope. I was reclaiming my story. I was learning to be strong again. I was learning that it was okay to put myself first. Later that night, I talked with Jake about my meeting with Jenna. "I think it went well considering what had happened," I told him. "I feel like I finally set some boundaries. I'm ready to start healing." "You did the right thing, man," Jake said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Now it's time to focus on you. You've been through hell, and it's your turn to come out stronger. We'll get through this together." I nodded, feeling the weight of my decision. The road ahead was still full of uncertainty, but I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I had the support of my friends, and I was ready to face whatever came next. It was Time to take back control of my life. The days turned into weeks, and I felt like I was slowly emerging from the fog of betrayal. Leaving Jenna was one of the hardest decisions I had ever made, but it was also liberating. I was finally prioritizing my own well-being. Each morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to reclaim my life piece by piece. My sessions with the therapist were proving invaluable. I learned about the stages of grief, not just in terms of loss, but also in terms of trust and love. I was grieving for the relationship I thought I had, the vision of a life together that had crumbled right before my eyes. I worked through my feelings of anger, sadness, and betrayal, and began to nurture a sense of self-worth I hadn't felt in a long time. I also began to focus on my physical recovery. I had spent too many months letting my injuries dictate my life, and now was the time to take control. I increased my rehab sessions and pushed myself harder than ever. Each small victory, lifting more weight, walking without a limp, felt monumental. I was proving to myself that I was strong, capable, and deserving of a life beyond the confines of what had happened. While I was on this journey of self-discovery, I found myself reconnecting with friends I had neglected during my marriage. I spent more time with Jake and other buddies from the service, sharing laughs and enjoying the camaraderie I had missed. They reminded me who I was before it all, the soldier, the friend, the man who had dreams and aspirations beyond the walls of my home. One night while hanging out with Jake, we decided to go out for drinks. It was something I hadn't done in a long time. We hit up a local bar, and I felt a sense of normalcy wash over me. It was refreshing to talk about anything other than the mess I had been dealing with. As the night went on, I realized how much I had missed simply enjoying life. As I sipped my beer, I noticed a group of women at the bar laughing and enjoying themselves. Among them was a striking brunette with a warm smile. She caught my eye, and for the first time in a while, I felt a flutter of interest. I hadn't even considered dating anyone since the fallout with Jenna, but something about her drew me in. Jake, noticing my gaze, nudged me with a grin. "You should go talk to her, man. You've been through hell, time to have some fun." I hesitated, the memories of Jenna still fresh in my mind, but Jake encouraged me. "What do you have to lose? You're a great guy, Mark. Just go over and say hi." Gathering my courage, I approached the group. "Hey, I'm Mark," I said, trying to play it cool. The brunette smiled back, and I felt a rush of confidence. "Mind if I join you for a bit?" She introduced herself as Sarah, and we quickly fell into easy conversation. I found myself laughing and connecting with her on a level I hadn't experienced in ages. It was refreshing to share stories and learn about someone new, to escape the weight of my past, even if just for a night. As the night progressed, I learned that Sarah was also a military veteran, having served in the Air Force. Our shared experiences made the conversation flow effortlessly. We talked about our deployments, the challenges we faced, and how we were both navigating life after the service. There was a mutual understanding that felt grounding and comforting. By the end of the night, we exchanged numbers, and there was a promise of getting together again. I felt exhilarated but also nervous. Could I really be moving on? Would I be ready to open my heart again after everything that had happened with Jenna? As I drove home, I replayed the night in my mind. The laughter, the connection, the feeling of being attractive again, everything felt so new. I realized I had been so focused on the pain and betrayal that I had lost sight of the possibilities that existed beyond my past. In the following weeks, I began to hang out with Sarah more frequently. Our dates were casual, dinners, hikes, or just grabbing coffee, but they brought me a sense of joy I thought I had lost forever. With her, I felt free from the shadows of my old life. It was a stark contrast to the heaviness I had been carrying. Through Sarah, I learned how to laugh again and let myself be vulnerable without the fear of being hurt. I found myself sharing stories about my deployment, my dreams, and even the pain of my recent separation. Surprisingly, she listened without judgment, offering support and understanding that felt so genuine. However, as I started to build this new connection, I also felt pangs of guilt. Jenna was still very much a part of my life. Her betrayal had left a mark that I was still healing from. I didn't want to rush into something new without fully processing everything I had gone through. I needed to be careful both for my sake and for Sarah's. I decided to keep the lines of communication open with Jenna, mainly to ensure there was closure. I wanted to make sure I was moving on for the right reasons. One evening I called her and we met up again, this time in a more amicable setting, a park where we could walk and talk without the pressure of a cafe. "Mark," she started, her voice softer than before, "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I know I hurt you. I'm truly sorry for everything that happened. I miss you, and I wish I could take back what I did." "I appreciate you saying that, Jenna," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "But it can't just be about what you want. I need to focus on my healing now. I've met someone and I don't want to string you along." Her face fell, the sadness evident. "I understand. I wish things were different. I just hope you can find happiness." In that moment, I felt a sense of closure. I could see that Jenna was genuinely remorseful, but I also realized that I had moved on. I wasn't tied to her past anymore. I had found a new path, and it was one I was excited to explore. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt a lightness in my heart. I was finally ready to embrace my future. With Sarah by my side and the lessons I had learned from my past, I was ready to step into a new chapter of my life, one filled with hope, resilience, and the possibility of love again. As I continued to explore this new chapter of my life with Sarah, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in a long time. Each day brought new adventures, and I found myself rediscovering joy in the little things, sunny mornings, shared laughter, and the thrill of living without the burden of betrayal weighing me down. Sarah and I had developed a comfortable rhythm. Our dates became more frequent, and we spent long weekends hiking in the nearby mountains, exploring local diners, and simply enjoying each other's company. She had a way of making me feel alive again, as if the shadows of the past were finally dissipating. I could talk to her about my experiences in the military, my recovery, and even the pain of my marriage with Jenna without feeling judged. It was refreshing to be with someone who understood the complexities of life after service. One evening, after a long hike, we sat on a picturesque overlook, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, and I felt at peace. We talked about our dreams for the future, traveling, pursuing new hobbies, and the things we had learned through our respective journeys. As I looked at Sarah, I couldn't help but smile. She was inspiring, and I admired her resilience. "Mark, I know things have been complicated for you," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I just want you to know I'm here for you. Whenever you're ready to talk about your past, I'm all ears. No pressure, though." Her words hit me deeply. I felt grateful for her patience, especially after everything I had been through with Jenna. I knew I wasn't completely over my past, but Sarah gave me the space I needed to process my emotions. "Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot to me," I replied, trying to convey just how much her support meant to me. "I'll find the right moment to share." But as the weeks went on, the memories of my time with Jenna lingered in the back of my mind. I was still processing the emotional fallout from the affair, and while I focused on building a new relationship, I wondered if I was ready to fully open my heart again. Then one day, as I was organizing some old boxes I had stored away, I stumbled upon a collection of letters that Jenna had written to me during my deployment. I hadn't seen them in years, and as I read through her words, filled with love, longing, and excitement to see me again, my heart ached with familiarity. These letters reminded me of the connection we once shared, a time when everything felt right in our lives. But along with the nostalgia came a flood of mixed emotions. I felt angry at how easily she had thrown away our love, and yet part of me mourned the loss of what we had built together. I tossed the letters aside, realizing I needed to focus on the present and the healthy relationship I was trying to cultivate with Sarah. By this point, Sarah and I had been dating for a couple of months, and I decided it was time to share my story with her. I wanted her to know the truth about my past, not just the highlights of my military career or my hobbies. I wanted her to see the real me, the vulnerable, imperfect man who was still healing. We planned a cozy evening at my place, complete with homemade dinner and a movie. As we settled on the couch, I took a deep breath, knowing that honesty was the best path forward. Sarah, there's something I need to talk to you about. I started, feeling the weight of my words. Of course, Mark. What's on your mind? She replied, her face attentive and caring. I hesitated before plunging into the story of my marriage with Jenna, the good, the bad, and the heartbreak. I recounted my experiences, focusing on the moments of joy we shared, followed by the betrayal I had faced. I could see Sarah's expression shift from curiosity to empathy as I explained the toll it had taken on my heart. I want you to know all of this because I don't want to hide anything from you, I said, my voice steady. I'm still healing and I'm determined not to let my past affect this relationship. I'm genuinely excited about where we're heading, but I need you to understand where I'm coming from. To my relief, Sarah listened intently, never interrupting. When I finished, she took a moment to absorb everything. Thank you for sharing that with me, Mark, she finally said, her voice warm. It takes a lot of courage to open up about pain like that. I appreciate your honesty, and I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. Her response filled me with a sense of relief. I had feared that sharing my past would push her away, but instead, it seemed to have brought us closer. We spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. It felt good to be vulnerable and still be accepted for who I was. However, my journey wasn't without its challenges. Jenna continued to reach out sporadically, trying to rekindle some semblance of connection. She sent messages filled with apologies and reminders of the love we once had. I struggled with how to respond. Part of me felt guilty for moving on, while the other part knew I had to protect my newfound happiness. One evening, after receiving yet another heartfelt text from her, I turned to Jake for advice. Man, she's really trying to pull me back in, I admitted, rubbing my temples in frustration. I feel guilty for moving on, but I don't want to go back to that life. You have to do what's best for you, Mark, Jake replied, leaning back in his chair. Jenna made her choices, and now you have to make yours. It's okay to feel guilty, but don't let that guilt overshadow your happiness. You've worked hard to get to where you are now. His words resonated with me. I needed to stand firm in my decision to move forward and not let Jenna's attempts at reconciliation derail my progress. I decided it was time to set clear boundaries. I composed a message to Jenna, outlining my feelings. I appreciate your messages and the remorse you've expressed, but I need to be clear. I'm moving on with my life. I wish you well, but I can't continue to entertain conversations. I hope you understand. Hitting send was both liberating and terrifying. I knew it would close the door on that chapter for good, but it felt like the right step toward my healing. In that moment, I reaffirmed my commitment to Sarah and the life I was building. As I looked ahead, I felt hopeful. Yes, I still had scars from my past, but I was learning to embrace them. I had a beautiful connection with Sarah, and I was ready to nurture it. I was ready to love again, this time with my eyes wide open and my heart prepared to face whatever came next. As I moved forward from the decision to distance myself from Jenna, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to embrace the future with Sarah without the shadows of my past looming over me. As the weeks passed, our relationship deepened, and I realized how much I had longed for this connection, authentic, supportive, and rooted in mutual respect. Sarah and I began to establish our own traditions. Friday nights became our dedicated time for cooking dinner together, trying new recipes, and sharing a bottle of wine. We would laugh, tease each other, and share stories about our lives. I found joy in the simplicity of those moments, which felt miles away from the complexities and heartache of my past. One weekend, we took a spontaneous trip to the coast. The salty air and crashing waves were invigorating. As we strolled along the beach, hand in hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was no longer carrying the burdens of betrayal or regret. I was simply living in the moment. We laughed and played in the surf, and I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in ages. That evening, as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant colors, I turned to Sarah. You know, I really didn't think I could feel like this again, I admitted, my voice sincere. You've helped me heal in ways I didn't know I needed. She looked up at me, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. I'm glad to hear that, Mark. You deserve happiness. We all have our battles, but it's how we move forward that defines us. Her words resonated deeply. I realized that my journey wasn't just about overcoming the pain of infidelity. It was about rediscovering who I was beyond the hurt. Through my time with Sarah, I was learning to be vulnerable again while maintaining my strength. However, I knew that the past would always be a part of me, and I had to confront it head-on. One evening, I received a text from Jenna, expressing her continued remorse and a desire to move on as well. Instead of feeling the guilt that had plagued me before, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened, how I had grown and learned through the trials. I decided to respond honestly. I thanked her for her messages but reiterated that I was moving on with my life and wished her well. It was a bittersweet moment, but I felt empowered. I wasn't going back. I was forging ahead and I was ready to fully embrace my new life. As Sarah and I continued to grow closer, I found myself dreaming about the future, what it might hold for us. One day, as we sat on the couch watching the rain fall outside, an idea struck me. How do you feel about taking a trip to Europe? I asked, excitement bubbling up inside me. I've always wanted to see Italy and I'd love to explore it with you. Her eyes lit up and she grinned. I'd love that. I've always wanted to go to Italy. We could explore Rome, Florence, and maybe even take a cooking class. That moment solidified what I had been feeling all along, a sense of partnership and adventure. Planning our trip became a shared dream that drew us even closer together. As we booked our flights and mapped out our itinerary, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. I had faced betrayal and heartbreak, but I had also found resilience and hope. I learned that love wasn't just about the absence of pain. It was about building something beautiful together, even amidst the scars. On the day of our flight, I felt butterflies of excitement coursing through me. I was ready to explore new places, make memories, and embrace the life I had been given. I was taking control, not just of my healing, but of the future I wanted to create. As the plane took off, I looked at Sarah, her smile bright against the backdrop of the clouds. I felt grateful for her presence in my life and for the journey that had led me here. In that moment, I knew I was ready to take on whatever came next, with an open heart and a spirit unshackled by my past. The road ahead was uncertain, as life always is, but I felt equipped to navigate it. I had learned to trust again, not only in others but in myself. I was no longer defined by my pain. I was defined by my strength, my ability to love, and my determination to move forward. This journey of healing had taught me invaluable lessons, and I hope to share those insights with others who might find themselves in similar situations. Life could be brutal, but it could also be beautiful. It was about finding the courage to rise above the pain and embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. I took Sarah's hand, smiling as we soared into the open sky. We were embarking on a new adventure, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for whatever came next.